Hello and welcome to hour 17 of ID24, November 2017. ID24 is brought to you by the Paciella Group with kind support from Barclays and the Centre for Inclusive Design, and you can find out more about those organisations on our website. If you like this session, please hit the like button and subscribe to the ID24 channel for future event streams and videos. We're planning to do a lot more on this channel, so subscribing is the best way to find out about it. Don't forget to send us questions for our presenters by tweeting it to the ID24 hashtag, and we'll pass these questions on to the presenters at the end of each session. And for each session, the best question will receive a free 90-day JAWS license. Just a note that the YouTube chat is open, but we are not monitoring it for questions to our presenter. It's just there so you can chat to your fellow participants and share any information you've got. And with that said, I will pass you over to our presenter for this hour, and that is Vasilis, who is going to talk about exclusive design.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. Hello, everybody. Greetings from cold Amsterdam. Well, not very cold, but colder than in Indonesia, probably. So today I'm going to talk to you about exclusive design. What I really want to teach you, what I hope you will agree with me after this session, is that a user interface, a user experience that looks like this one, with moving things and beautifully laid out, that this is a better user experience than something that looks like this. Which is all text on top of each other, which means it is unreadable. So that's the goal of this session, that after this session, you will all agree with me that this is not something we should be aiming for. Okay, a while ago, a colleague of mine, Yuri Westblad, gave a presentation, and he showed these slides, the next few slides, and he said, well, when he started with graphical user interface design in the 90s, it looked like this to him. It was like being on a desert island where he could explore everything. The whole world is wide open and he could do whatever he wanted. And it looked fantastic. He was so happy. And then the first book got published about user experience design. And well, it said, well, yes, you can do anything, but there are certain things that you probably shouldn't do. And then a next book got published, which said, well, yeah, well, this is the best way to design web forms. And then a book got published about, well, let's say, web standards, that we shouldn't be using tables, but we should be using CSS instead, and so on and so on. And right now, to Yuri, designing things, designing graphical user interfaces feels a bit like this. I mean, yeah, he can move the thing around a little bit, but that's about it. And if he's really creative, then he can put the slot on its side and peek through it like that. But this is how it feels. So Yuri went on to a next profession. And, well, we can say that Yuri thinks, for Yuri at least, we have reached peak graphical user interface. We are at the top of what we're able to do. And this, some people might know this, Aaron Walter's pyramid of users needs, which is a pyramid. At the bottom it says it's functional, and then comes a layer that interface should be reliable. After it's reliable, it should be usable, and after that, it should be pleasurable. And Yuri has reached peak graphical user interface. He can create interfaces that are functional, reliable, usable, and pleasurable. And last week I was at a conference, and somebody said, well, we can call it the fun in functional. Yi-Young Lee said that. You should follow her. Incredible woman. So if we put the fun in functional, we reach peak graphical user interface. And well, lots of people might disagree with that. We have not reached peak graphical user interface. Travis Getz, for instance, in his fantastic essay, Design Machines, has a few very good arguments in which he says we have not reached that peak yet. But for the sake of the argument of this presentation, we will assume that we have reached peak graphical user interface. Now, a few months ago, I invited Leonie Watson over to our university here in Amsterdam to do a talk. And I asked her to come over because I was discussing user interfaces with a student of mine who is blind. And I asked her if she could tell me, I asked the student of mine if she could tell me what a pleasurable user interface would be for her. And she couldn't really answer that. So Leonie came over to Amsterdam to do a talk, and I asked her to do this talk and a Q&A about pleasurable user interfaces for somebody who is blind, like herself. Leonie is a blind developer, and the answer was actually pretty depressing. She said, well, for me, it's basically what she said is it's a pleasure when I can do the task that I want to do there. So if it's possible in any way to accomplish the task that should be done on that page, then I'm happy. Well, this, of course, is only the bottom layer. So what Leonie said is, if it's functional, I'm really happy, then it's pleasurable. And even if it's functional sometimes, then it's good enough for me, which of course means that is the functional without the fun in it, which is pronounced like something like functional, and I don't know how to pronounce that. So this is not something that we should aim for, right? I think this is a pretty depressing level. And I'll try to show you what that would look like if we would have to experience the web like Leonie does. So the Inclusive Design 24 website wouldn't look like this, like a pretty well-designed, well-structured web page, but it would look like this. It would have this layover all the time on it, which says, give us your soul. And by continuing, you agree to eat our terms of service, our policy, and our cookies. If we have this layer over it, it would be acceptable because, well, we can scroll the page and still see some of the content below it, right? This is a pleasurable, this is how I interpret what Leonie said would be a pleasurable user experience for her. Or it wouldn't look like this, but it would look like this, where all the content is placed on top of each other, so you cannot read anything really. And well, this is really, really impossible to read, but well, we can view source and then skip through there and then look at the content, and well, this would even this would be a pleasurable user experience for Leonie. Well, I think we all agree that this is not a pleasurable user interface. And this is not something that I would want to use. I would leave this website immediately and would not do the task at hand. So we could say this is very, very depressing, but at the same time we can say, well, this opens up all kinds of possibilities, right? We have so much to explore when it comes to accessible design. We're very good at making graphical user interfaces, but we haven't even started yet with really designing interfaces for people with other needs. Now, let me try to explain to you why I like the web so much. I saw this illustration a few years ago in a book by Smashing Magazine. I really like this illustration. It's made by Mike Cuss. We had a very boring wall in our house, and we decided to paint this illustration onto the wall. And after, well, a while, it looked like this. Now, the developers amongst you might say, this looks good, but the designers amongst you, you all seen it already, this illustration is off the grid. It shouldn't look like this. It should look like this. And this, of course, is a lot of work. As you all know, there is no such thing as Command Z in real life. So I had to repaint the wall, make it gray, then find these files of these stencils that I'd created in Illustrator, then find out how Illustrator works to make these stencils a little bit smaller, send these stencils over to the laser cutter who used to live on the other side of Amsterdam back then, and then ask my kid to please get off my car so I can drive to the other side of Amsterdam, pick up the stencils, and then paint every single circle back onto the wall again. Now, as you may understand, this is really a lot of work. It took me a few weeks, maybe 3 weeks, to get this done. Then it's there, it's beautiful, I'm happy with it. We're all happy with it. And then when I sat down that evening, I thought, okay, now I have to thank my cuss, right? Well, not really stole, but well, I recreated this illustration onto my wall and I hadn't even asked him for permission. So I thought, how can I thank him? And I decided to recreate his illustration again, but this time using web technology, using HTML and CSS. And this resulted in the semantic responsive illustration.com, where you can see this illustration with but now made with web technology. Now, the nice thing about the web is, well, there are quite a few nice things about the web, but one thing that I really like is that you can optimize this thing for different screen sizes. And then, the nice thing is not really what we can see here is all these students. The interesting thing is not so much that they have very expensive computers. I'm not sure about you, but when I was a student, I didn't have money to buy a computer because the very little money that I had, well, I had to spend it on alcohol and drugs, basically. But what we see here is a work of art by Raphael Roosendaal with mirrors that represent the common screen sizes of the common screen sizes of computers a few years ago. Now, if you would recreate this illustration today or this work of art, your whole room would be covered in different screen sizes. That many screen sizes we have right now to serve the web, basically. And this means that this semantic responsive illustration, we can show it like this. I hope this animation works for everybody, but what you see here is that the illustration, it responds to different screen sizes and it adjusts its layout to fit better on the screen at hand. I love this, right? I think it's fantastic that we have these responsive layouts. I did a lot of talks about responsive design. I love it. It's fantastic. But there's more things that I really like about the web. For instance, some of you older people might remember that there used to be browsers that don't support border radius. So what should this illustration look like for these browsers? Should it look like this? Well, to be honest, I don't think it should look like this because this is an illustration of rectangles, while the original illustration is clearly an illustration of circles. So I decided that people, instead of showing this to people with all the browsers, people with, for instance, Opera Mini will get to see this, where it's a textual interpretation, a representation of the illustration, but with some colors behind it, so you can get a grip of what the colors are. And now, if you're a good illustrator, you can even come up with a more beautiful illustration. And the thing that I really like is that people with Internet Explorer, very old versions of Internet Explorer, they can even make up their own colors because Internet Explorer, as you might know, does not support HSL color notation. This is, of course, funny, but it's also really good. This is a fantastic this is really something of the web that I think is fantastic. And this also means that, yes, people with very old browsers can use it, but it also means that people who cannot see can use it now. So their screen readers, for instance, can now read this to them. And I really wish we had something like voice family poetic in CSS. So this would sound like balls, 2 connected balls, a blue ball, a blue ball, a red ball. That would be beautiful. Then we can create different kinds of experiences for blind people as well. Now, and the reason why this works is really because the web was designed like this. It is made like this. Tim Berners-Lee, one of the principles he used when he created the web, when he came up with the idea, was the idea that it should be there for everybody. And then really, really everybody. Not just people like me with very expensive computers, but for everybody, people with old computers, people with small computers, but also with people with different abilities. I think this is fantastic, and this is really why I love the web so much. And the web, when we talk about inclusive design, the web is just inclusive in its basics. It's built like that. That's one of its principles. And what we can do with this, I think this is a nice example of something that Hayden Pickering created a while ago, a drum machine, which, well, you can control it with your mouse if you want to, but here I have a video of how you can control it via keyboard. And, well, even better maybe, you can tap through the thing, you can really change everything, and this works fantastic. And this can be done by using the inclusive design principles. These were published a while ago by the Paciello group. Well, they are very sensible principles, right? You should provide comparable experiences to different people with different devices, different needs. You should consider different situations that people can be in. You should be consistent when using patterns. You should give people control if they want it, offer the choice that people want, so don't just make one single solution, but offer different kinds of solutions. I mean, this really makes sense. But I thought, I read a while ago, I read an article by Jeremy Keith in which he explained that to test good design principles, you should be able to flip them, and then when you flip them, they should still work in a different situation. So I decided to flip these inclusive design principles to see what they look like. And then when you flip them, they look like this, which I think is fine. It looks good. But really, really what happens here is that when you flip the inclusive design principles, you get, of course, the exclusive design principles. So instead of providing comparable experiences, we provide one unique experience. Instead of considering situation, we study situation. Instead of being consistent, we are innovative. And instead of giving control to anybody, we take control and offer the very best solution for this one situation. And instead of prioritizing content, we prioritize identity. And, well, it's probably not really instead of adding value, but on top of adding value, we add nonsense. And this is really something that we do all the time. We see it around us everywhere. Most websites, well, no, not most websites, but many, many websites are made like this. They are designed exclusively for instance, me. So this is a website of a Dutch water company. And I think this is designed exclusively for somebody like me who likes wobbly buttons, who like things that move, who likes backgrounds with different colors. I mean, this is a nice experience. This is beautifully made for me, and it's also made for me because I have a very fast computer. My computer can actually render this stuff without any problems. So this is tailor-made for Vasilis and for many other people, but it's really designed like that. I mean, look at that menu. This is fantastic. I love it. We need more wobbly and bobbly buttons and wobbly menus as well. I mean, the web is maybe too boring. So can we please add stuff like this? Okay, so I was wondering, these exclusive design patterns, of course, it's not a really good idea to use them for somebody like me who has, well, most of the things, who has no issues whatsoever. But what if we use these for somebody like Leonie? What if we start designing exclusively for people with disabilities? I think we actually should be doing that. And look at these principles now. So if we provide a unique experience for somebody who is blind, well, maybe that does make sense, because as I showed you before, we're not really good at that yet. And we should study situations, because we haven't been studying these situations enough, I think. Because, well, if Leonie says that a view source is a pleasurable experience for her, then I think we can do better. We should study situation to make sure that she doesn't have to do that again. And instead of being, we should be innovative, because, well, there's a lot to innovate. There are no patterns for everything yet. We have to come up with solutions that don't exist yet. So we have to take control as well as experts, and to come up with very, very good solutions there, and offer the best solution to these people. One thing that I found really interesting is when you flip this, the inclusive design principles, is that you can come up with something like prioritize identity. And what happens when you add the identity of, for instance, the person who's going to use your application? What happens then? If right? I think this is a very interesting question. And on top of that, well, of course, we should first add value and make sure that everything works and that it's functional. But we should maybe add some time as well to add some nonsense to the things, because there is room for fun every now and then, right? Okay, and this reminded me of a book that I read this summer, The Design Meets Disability by Graham Pullin. A really, really good book. I recommend everybody to read it. It's very, very good. It has a little bit of a different approach to accessible design. It's a physical product design book mostly, but it's really easy to translate this to digital product design as well if you want to. He wanted to call the book Design Against Disability, which I think is a fantastic title, but I'm afraid people without humor would not really like this title, but it's a really good book. And what he says is that if we, that right now, designing for accessibility is often approached from an engineering standpoint and not from a designer's standpoint. So an engineer simply says, okay, well, this thing works, it's done, right? It's functional, so this means it's done. But a designer can now start adding things to it or thinking about it or changing the thing. And a good example is, for instance, glasses. 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it was really uncool to have glasses, to wear glasses, and people might even bully you for it. And it was really something that you did not want. But glasses were engineered. They were just iron wire with glass, purely functional, but no aesthetics, no identity. And what happened a few years ago, 10, 20 years ago, is that glasses became fashionable. Fashion designers started designing them, and now people have more than one pair of glasses, and they wear them all the time. They even have glasses that have fake glass in it. So this is really interesting. What would happen, for instance, if we approached hearing aids in a similar way, where instead of making them as small as possible, as of course from a functional point of view, from an engineering point of view, is a nice goal. But what if we said, no, they don't have to be small, they may be large and visible? Then suddenly we have many more powers, many more options for them. And then we have hearing aids with superpowers. This is a really interesting approach. I like this approach. I was very, very much inspired by this book. Same thing with if you lose your legs. Do those, how do you call them, prostheses, do they have to be purely functional? Well, I don't think so. If you go to a party, of course you can have beautifully sculpted prostheses as well. I'm a bit jealous of these. These would be fantastic. So this is, of course, luxurious. You might know this fantastic example of the two Brits in their shed who make prostheses for kids. They print them, 3D printing. They're really cheap, cheaper than shoes. And kids outgrow these things all the time. So this is a really good idea. They're very simple to make, very cheap, and the kids can choose the color, which is fantastic, of course. Now you can have your favorite color, an arm in your favorite colors. This is, of course, so beautiful. People will be jealous. Kids in school will be jealous. This is a fantastic, very simple idea, which adds this identity ID to things that are purely functional. Another example from the book, I really like this one, is a simple button that Somia is wearing. Somia has a severe problem. She cannot talk. She can communicate, though, but with a book with images, so she has to go through the book, point at images, and this takes, of course, a long time to say something. And there are two things that she wants to say, and one is her name, so she wants people to always know what her name is, which is Somia. And another thing is, if she finds people irritating, she wants to be able to say sod off. And this, again, is a very personal thing, right? Not everybody would say sod off. Some people would say, well, fuck off, or Aigamisu in Greek, or please leave me alone, right? There are many different ways to say this. This is very much dependent on your identity. And I like this idea. Of course, we don't really do that on the web, not that much, right? We don't add the identity of the person who is going to use the thing to the thing that we design. I think this is a very interesting idea, and we should be doing that more. This is another one, more of a work of art, which is for people who have difficulties expressing themselves. This is a pillow that you can scream into. For instance, what's that old guy looking at me? Leave me alone! But nobody will hear it because it's very well insulated. And then when you get home, you can open up this pillow again and the scream gets released. I really like these kinds of experiments, design or art experiments. And this is not purely functional, right? There are several layers added to this. Not all as useful, maybe, but I really do like them. This is another one. What he did at the end of the book, what I really liked, he asked product designers to think about a solution for a common problem. So, for instance, these are step stools. Some people need step stools, are really small, and then when they want to go to a bar and order a beer or something, they need this stool. Now, from an engineering point of view, we would make this stool as small as possible so that it's easy to carry, so it's not bumping into people. But from a designer's point of view, she said, no, this stool needs to make a little cuff, right? It has to, instead of me asking people to step aside, this stool could do this for me. I really like this way of thinking. This is very clever thinking. Now, something else. A few years ago, I was swimming in the Mediterranean, and there on the bottom of the sea, I saw a glass bowl. And this was not just a glass bowl, this was a fish bowl. A fish bowl on the bottom of the sea. And I was happy that I had my GoPro with me, so I took a video of it, and indeed, in that fish bowl lives a fish. Now, this, of course, nobody would believe if I hadn't brought my camera with me, but there it was. And this got me thinking. This fish has the whole ocean available, but it decides to start living in a fish bowl, something that we think is not very kind for fishes, but this fish thought, well, out of the whole ocean, this is the very best place to be, actually. And this got me thinking. I used to be a front-end developer at a large agency, and a pretty siloed agency, and I thought, okay, maybe it's good to stay in your silo, to keep to yourself. But luckily for me, the next day the fish was gone. It went out for a swim. It went somewhere else, or maybe it decided this is not the best place to be. So this, for me, meant maybe I have to look at other people, at other professions as well. So I changed job, became a teacher, and here at this university where I work, there's all kinds of different people with different backgrounds, all kinds of teachers, design teachers, many designers with completely different backgrounds, very interesting people, all of them, and they all have different opinions. Some of these opinions are not immediately comparable to my ideas, but that doesn't really matter. It's very interesting to see that there's so many ways to approach problems. So I decided to start a podcast series where I interview different kind of designers and ask them about their definition of quality. This has been running for a bit over a year now. So after a year, I had about 40 people that I could invite to do something with. So I knew these people now. So I invited them over to come and do a workshop with me, an exclusive design challenge with me here in Amsterdam. And I gave them, so this was the very first, the good, the bad, and the interesting exclusive design challenge. And I asked them to design something to really design something for a real person. So not for a persona, but for a real somebody. For instance, for Marie, who is deaf with capital D. She was born deaf. And she has, of course, her own personality, and she has her own set of issues that she has to deal with every day. Or I asked them to design something for Arnold, my father, who is slowly turning deaf. And he has, of course, his own personality, but also very different set of problems that he has to deal with every day. So I gave them these assignments to work with, and then I gave them these tools, for instance, a headphone with noise on it to simulate deafness, or these Cambridge simulation gloves. No, they do not simulate Cambridge. Don't even know what that means. They simulate arthritis. These are really, really good tools. You should have these in your tool set. They're really, really interesting to try and navigate a website on your phone with these things on. It's pretty hard. I had this little torture device, which if you put the pads onto your arm, you don't have control over your arm anymore. A really severe motor impairment it can provoke for a few minutes. Really interesting thing. And I made these glasses, which, well, simulate blindness. One thing you have to remember when you use these things is that they're really better than the real thing. I mean, it's much better to wear these glasses than to really be blind, because you can take these glasses off. So it's not a real simulation. It is a simulation. It's not the real thing. So it's completely different, but it can help you to empathize a little bit. So yes, do use these tools, but you have to know this about using these kinds of tools. Of course, I asked the designers of this workshop to use the exclusive design principles, and I explicitly asked them if they had a problem with the principles to at least prioritize identity, because I was really curious about what would happen if we would prioritize identity. And, well, the outcome was interesting. So there was this group that came up with the Space Lord construction kit. They designed they came up with a new kind of wheelchair for Marijn, who has severe motor problems. And one of the issues that Marijn has is that he cannot enter a train on his own. And in the Netherlands, this means that if you want to take a train, you have to tell the train or use a website, I don't know, something. You have to warn people that you want to use exactly that that train on that time, and you cannot miss a train. And me, for instance, in the Netherlands, it's not really a problem to miss a train because there'll be a next one in 10 minutes. But for him, this means that he cannot use the train. So he wanted something to be more independent, and adding feet to the wheelchair instead of wheels would mean that he could be able to walk into the train. Very interesting ideas, very personal. These are not things that we would have come up with without, when we wouldn't have focused on the personality, on the identity of the person that we were designing for. Same with this solution, where they were designing something for Larissa. Larissa is blind and she has a guide dog, and they came up with the, well, this already exists, I think. Microsoft has these glasses that can see around, and then it can actually tell the person who's wearing them what's around them, how many people are around them, and for instance can describe the room to them, things like that. A very interesting new technology, fantastic of course for blind people. What this group, what they came up with was, well, we shouldn't be letting, using this as let the sound output be done via headphones. The output should be done by the dog. So it should be like the dog is talking, like the dog, like the identity of the dog is part of the solution. I thought this was really, really interesting, right? Dogs, well, dogs can have humor, maybe, I don't know. So this can help to start conversations. It can open up many, many new possibilities. Purely functional, but it's very handy for many different situations. I really like this idea. I'm not sure if anybody else would like it, and I'm really not sure if Larissa would like it, but to have her dog talking all the time, but I think it's really interesting way to approach things. Now, I shared these all these assignments. You can find them in Dutch and in English via the link that you can see here, which is vvg.gr/qf. You can download all of them there. It's a zip file with PDFs in them. I'm really sorry about that. I have to make a better website for it. The website will be available via this same link when I'm done making it. But right now, it's the PDFs, and there you can find all the assignments, all the descriptions of the personalities, all the issues that they have to deal with, and things like that. And I would really like it if you would use this. So for instance, the next time you design, let's say, the new Vimeo, use these exclusive design principles and use these assignments to try and come up with a pleasurable solution for Vimeo for somebody who is blind. Or if you're working on a podcast, you could try and use these assignments and these principles to come up with a pleasurable experience for somebody who is deaf, right? What would a pleasurable experience be of a podcast? So I think this tool could help there. Another thing that would be really interesting is if we would use this to make pleasurable text forms. I mean, my friend Pete Stakers once said the only pleasurable user experience of filling in text forms is drinking beer with my friends. And of course, I have to agree with him. This should be fully automated, and this is not something that you want to do in your spare time. But it is. There is something between drinking beer and getting this message. I got this message once when I was done filling in my taxes, which said, amount to be paid by applicant minus 2,000 euro. And I didn't even know what that means. I mean, does this mean that I have to pay 2,000 euro, or do I get 2,000 euro? I got really, well, stressed a little bit because I thought I would get money back. And what does this mean? Well, it did mean that I got 2,000 euros back, but there's a much easier way to design this, right? It should look like this, and not like you have to pay minus 2,000. So please do design experiences like this one. It's really not that hard. And please use this in a setting where you have experts working on it, so experts on interfaces. Because one of the issues that I have with this workshop that I did was that the outcome was nice. I mean, I thought the ideas was nice, but not very practical. It's not really something that I am going to make. And I'm a user experience designer. I make websites, so I'm really interested in the user interface. And I think that this exclusive design method may work, because one of the groups that worked on this workshop, they were experts. They were all design thinkers. They were all people who are used to think on a strategic level, to transform big organizations, things like that. So they're really used to transforming organizations. And I asked them to design something for Hidde. Some of you might have heard Hidde this morning. He did a fantastic talk about philosophy. They didn't come up with a philosophical solution for Hidde, though. Maybe they should have, because that was really, really good what he talked about. But they did come up with a very interesting solution, I think. And I'd like to share this one with you. And they took as a principle, they took the MVP. Some of you say this is minimum viable product. Other people, like Dave Rupert, say it's the maximum amount of shit we can put into a 2-week sprint. But it is, of course, it's MVP. And what they did, minimum viable product. And what they did is they were inspired by this flipping of the principles, and they said, what happens when we flip MVP? And what happens then is that you get MAP, which is the minimum accessible product. And once you have a name like this, they said, then it's something that you can sell. Then it's something that management can remember. This is something that senior level people, that a CEO can be proud of. We work with the MAP method, right? This is something that it sounds good. And then I think what's really interesting is that they use the exclusive design principles to come up with a set of a very inclusive design principles again. So they came up with this manifesto, which again I'm going to share with you. So it's a manifesto of 10 points, which makes up the MAP, the minimum accessible product. The minimum accessible product manifesto starts like this. It says the things we make are for everyone, for all people. And then not just for our users, but also for the whole organization. It is really for everybody. And it's not just made for everybody, it's made by everybody. So it's no silos, it's one team that works on the same product. And this is especially interesting for people, for front-end developers, like Hidde, for instance, or like I used to be. I mean, I think things have changed a little bit, but when I used to be a front-end developer, I used to be at the end of the waterfall. Well, that's what designers would call it, the waterfall. I would call it the sewer, where all the shit came out and I had to fix something. So this is really nice to hear that the things we make are made by everyone. And the things we make, they start with everyone, which is really interesting because it provides ethical clarity. When you say it's for everybody, then once you exclude somebody, you have to discuss this. There has to be a real good reason for this. And this is not really obvious always. Right now, we just make stuff for personas, but when you say we make stuff for everybody, and when you have to exclude somebody, you have to discuss this. And I really like this idea that you have to discuss these things. Well, the things we make are beautiful. Of course, things we make are beautiful. They should be. And the things we make are valuable. Well, sure, they should be, but in every sense. And I like this one as well. It's not just financially, which sells well for, of course, senior level management, but it should be humane as well. The things we make are humane as well. We make them for humans. We make them for people, for real people. The things we make are cheaper. Well, everybody who has ever done some rework, or who has ever tried to make a designed and built website to make it accessible after the fact knows that that's a really, really expensive process, and it's not really something to be proud of. So when you take these things into effect in the beginning, it's really much cheaper. They're flexible, The things we make are continuous. It's a design method, no production method. Well, this falls well with some people. And they make us feel better, of course. Sure, it does. Of course, it makes you feel good when you know that the thing you made can be used by everybody, and that it makes people more independent in their own lives. Of course, this is fantastic. This is something that we should all be aiming for. And then we make implicit bias explicit. I think this is also really interesting, because since we will be discussing all these issues, if we want to exclude somebody, well, hidden prejudice will surface when you have all these kinds of discussions. And then maybe you don't have to exclude somebody, but maybe you have to find out that it's just a prejudice. And then the things we make, they spark conversation. It's a critical method, and our choices are consciously made and are well considered. I like this, right? Be aware of the choices that you make and discuss them with the people you have. I'd love to discuss these things after my talk. If you have any questions, please do ask them. And please, I do hope that you all agree with me that this is not a pleasurable user interface, not for me, not for people who are blind, and that we should all be aiming to create interfaces like this, and not just for me, who is a very lucky guy, but for everybody. We should be able to create these kinds of interfaces for people who are deaf, and only then I think we can start designing real inclusive things. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, Vasilis. That was fantastic. I really like the concept behind this. I think you know, maybe next time I'm asked if something's accessible, I'll ask who it's been designed to be accessible for. I think the minimal accessible product is a great idea as well. I think it's a good way to look at this. So
yeah, I was really happy with it. Yeah.
We only have one question, and that is what the site with the swirling cloud was. I think that's the water company website. November needs to use that as an example. Okay, so that's oasen.nl, oasen.nl. And it's actually, this website came up with a discussion I had with Peter van Grieken a while ago, and he he showed it to me, and he said, well, this is a very not accessible website. And it's not, right? If you try to navigate it with your keyboard, it's not going to work. It has, I think, 2 flash intros. Well, not really flash intros, but flashy intros. It's really not what we consider to be an accessible website, but these are technical things, and I think these can be solved, right? We can add keyboard navigation, and then people can use it. But what I really like is the attention to detail of this website, and the fun in it as well, right? There's so much fun in using this interface, and I really believe that this should be what we should all be aiming for. This should be our ambition. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay.
Okay, so just like to have a final shout out to Sapient Razorfish in Germany. I think they are coming to the end of their day of streaming. They've been streaming all day from 4 different locations in Germany, so I hope you've enjoyed the day. And Q Delft in the Netherlands have been streaming this afternoon. I don't know if they're still watching, but if so, I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope you enjoy what we've got to come up. So we are going to pick a winner for our 90-day JAWS license, and that is going to be Kat for her comments on Vasilis' talk. So a reminder that ID24 is brought to you by the Paciella Group with kind support from Barclays and the Centre for Inclusive Design, and you can find out more about those organisations on our website. If you like this session, please hit the like button and subscribe to the ID24 channel for future event streams and videos. Once again, Vasilis, thank you so much. That was a fantastic talk. Really, really enjoyed it. So we will be back in about 10 minutes, so please join us then. Thank you again.